It's time for another episode of CoffeePods with Acorn Christian Healing Foundation and your host, Lisa Way.
And the Reverend Chris Kramer. Grab a brew and make yourself comfortable
as we explore what's happening in the world from the perspective of Christian healing.
Hello, good to be back with you, Chris.
I'm angry today, and I want to talk about what it's like to be mad.
Oh no! Do you know what? For those who are listening and watching, your face was brilliant in that because you were smiling while you said it.
It was a giveaway.
But why are you angry? What makes you angry?
Because I have to shave every day, and I hate it. It's too hot to shave. It's too hot to even eat. I'm just miserable in this English heat right now. We're having a heat wave over here, and then you turn the television on, and there's heat all around the world with angry people and bombs and wars, and I'm just sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Actually, I think there are a lot of people feeling like you at the moment. Everything just feels up here, doesn't it? And it really gets.
So maybe that's something we need to talk about today. That might be this theme of the whole day today, is to talk about anger and peace and reconciliation and how in the world to navigate the chop of the world at the moment. It sure feels like the boat is rocking.
It does. I was just going to say, how long have we got? Because there's a lot
today
to talk
should be
about.
Part one. Part one.
Why don't we start by saying this is part one in case we need to have a part two? You say you're angry. How do you feel when you're angry? Like what goes on inside you?
I don't know. It's I guess in my brain, I always go to the scripture where Jesus finds the money changers in the temple. And it's like my go-to scripture for rage and anger, because I imagine Jesus walking into the temple, this place that's supposed to be the holy place to celebrate God the Father and the tradition of Abraham and Moses. And there they are changing shekels and ripping people off. And Jesus walks into that, and we're told in different accounts, one account he has a cord of leather, and he's like whipping people and flipping the tables and throwing stuff. You can imagine all the birds. I always think about the chickens and the feathers flying, because you've got all these birds for sacrifice that are being sold. And so he comes through just like a terror and throws it all up in the air. And he's furious because he's like, you've turned the house of my father into a den of thieves. And so when I think about being angry about something that is out of my control, I just sort of think that Jesus actually shares that passion, that real righteous indignation. And so that gives me a bit of comfort, although you can't let your anger play around inside of you too much, or you end up lashing out and doing things that become regrettable. You can't punch someone in the nose because they've made you mad, even though you want to punch them in the nose.
Yeah, definitely. I think something that makes me angry is like rudeness, when people are rude and disrespectful to other people, particularly when it comes maybe from a place of like injustice, but just general rudeness. Is there anything else that makes you
there's some funny cultural things, like I was, because recently I've been traveling a lot, and I noticed an American tourist who happened to be over here, and they were walking down to get on a train, and there was an English person, obviously in a hurry, either to get to work or get home or something, but they're in a hurry. So you have the tourist with the suitcase, and you have the local person.
Yeah.
And the local person goes to pass on the appropriate side. Well, the Americans turned around in their brain. And then this moment where the American thinks they're being very polite, and they say, "Oh, excuse me." The English person turns back to them and goes, "Excuse me?" Because over here, "excuse me" is like saying, "Hey, get out of the way. Who do you think you are?"
Yeah.
But the American thinks they're saying, "Oh, sorry." And so it's a completely different way of understanding. And those two cultural those cultures collide in that moment, and then you notice there's an awkwardness with both of them because both are right and yet both are wrong. And so there
Mm.
is a kind of interesting thing when you witness somebody getting fired up, because it can escalate. It's kind of funny. You'll watch, and somebody has to disengage and say, no, 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 you misunderstood me. I was saying I'm sorry. I'm sorry
Yeah.
I'm in your way. And so sometimes you'll even find people double, they'll double their comment to say,
Hmm.
I notice, like, going into a shop or something, after you, no, 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 after you, no, no, really, after you. And it's kind of
Yeah.
it's this English competition to see who can be the nicest, which is a great
Yeah.
thing. I mean, there's something about English culture where we really are intent on being seen as the nice guy. um, but but
It's so
but then
weird,
but
isn't
then England is the place of the greatest levels of passive aggressiveness that you've ever seen in the universe.
Oh, that does
Yeah,
not
yeah.
surprise
But it's
me.
it's the other thing that's kind of interesting is even the word mad. When someone says, "I'm so mad,"
Hmm.
well, when I was raising our children, somebody would say mad, and people would turn around and look and say crazy, insane. So
Yeah.
madness and
Yeah.
being mad are very different things. And so when someone says, "I am really cross with you," I am
Yeah.
mad. But if you said I'm cross to an American, they
Mhm.
would kind of go, cross? What does that mean? Oh, you're not happy. You're and so I would argue that sometimes there is madness in our madness, that we actually have anger
Oh,
that makes us a bit crazy. And so if we can find a way to disengage the madness from our madness, that we could actually find a way to live a better, more wholesome life and to be more functional, because that's the worst thing in the world, to feel dysfunctional, because our madness
yeah.
robs us of our clarity. Because when you're angry, when
Mm.
you're cross, you just want to throw the toys around the room and stomp your feet. And so
Mm.
you lack the ability to kind of intellectually look at the lay of the land and figure out what are the possible
Yeah.
solutions here where I might be able to get some of what I want, but at the same time, I'm not
Yeah.
causing this massive disruption. But that's kind of my
Absolutely.
my knee jerk reaction, because we live in a time where people are, I think I've said this before, that we live in a time of great sort of isolationism, where countries just
Yeah.
become so focused on what they need as an individual nation.
Yeah.
And what happens is then that becomes sort of infectious, and then people live their lives in isolation. So I don't need to worry about my neighbor.
Mm.
All I need to worry about is what's going on in my
Mm.
back garden. And until you
Yeah.
fire up the barbecue and you have smoke going into the neighbor's back garden, and then suddenly
Oh
there's a
goodness.
war. It's like, can you believe our
Yeah.
neighbors? Now they may not come and knock on your door
Yeah.
and tell you, but they'll tell the neighbors on the other side how
Oh,
disrespectful
they
you
will.
were of them. And so then you start thinking, well,
Yeah.
what's the solution? Where's the reconciliation in that? And as a
Yeah.
funny example, and I don't think my brother would mind me saying this, he has an annual party at his house every year. There's an
Yeah.
annual Valentine's Day party, which I'm hoping maybe I can go to after so many years of not being able to go. But he hosts this party in his back garden, and it's become like
Right.
this huge event. And they have a stage they set
Mm.
up, and my brother plays. He's a physician, but he plays in a band with a bunch of physicians, and all the doctors get
Nice.
together and they play music, and it's a fantastic event. And I said to him not too long ago, I said, well, how do you keep from getting the neighbors to complain? I said, don't all the neighbors just
Yeah.
complain that you make so much noise? And he smiled. It's typical of my brother. He sort of smiled at me, and he said, well, we invite all the neighbors and they all come. And I said, well, that's really the magic of finding your way through tense things, is that if you include your neighbors in what you're doing, then they get
Yeah.
to celebrate and enjoy the party. instead of being frustrated because they
That's
didn't
right.
get invited. And so in
Very
conflicts in
good.
the world
Yeah.
and all the other things that are going on, you start thinking, if we treated our neighbors as guests at our party, then that would change the way we interact
Mm.
with them, surely.
It gets me thinking though as well when you're just talking about your brother in that situation kind of knows what to do, but um, stuff like anger and other sort of mental journeys and struggles, we so often would be referred to specialist support. So I'm just thinking of something like anger, the benefit of having cognitive
Yeah.
behavior therapy, giving you the skill set to be able to respond differently
Mhm.
in situations like when anger takes over. And then I just suddenly think, okay, it's not just individuals who are angry. That, like you say, there's
Mm.
world conflicts. So something like
Yeah.
CBT may would it be as
Mhm.
effective? I don't know, but there is so much complex stuff when it comes. It's not
Yeah.
just, oh, I'm angry. There's a lot maybe deeper down that needs to be
Mm.
dealt with. And you provided for this podcast a really helpful quote by Mark
Oh,
Twain. Do you want to read it to us, Chris? If you
Mark
got it there,
Twain
if not,
said,
I can.
"Anger is the acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it's stored than to any on which it is poured." And old Mark Twain was a smart
That's
fella,
big.
but you think about if you keep
Yeah,
anger inside of you, it damages you a whole lot more than anybody else. And when you spew anger
yeah,
onto the world around you, you might think you're doing some great damage to all these bad people that deserve your wrath, or your wrath, I should say, since
yeah.
I'm over here. It's one of those words I never can do, wrath and wrath. It just
I always say wrath, and then people say, "Are you American?" And I thought, I've always known
You've
it
been
as wrath.
corrupted by us Americans. So, oh dear, just don't start
Yeah,
saying butter and better and batter. If you stop pronouncing your T's, you'll lose your passport. They'll
I
throw you
know.
out. Um, but no, I think it's interesting that um, people hold on to anger, and you're right, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, where you're just aware of yourself, your actions, your impulses,
Mm,
and your responses. It goes back to kindergarten when you see the teacher look at the little boy and say, use your words, count to five,
yeah.
count to five. Because what you're doing is you're
Mm,
creating these moments where you stop and you think and you breathe and you slow yourself down. You're aware, because that's the whole idea of cognition and being
yeah.
aware of your behaviors and what your
Mm,
triggers are and these things. Because if you're aware of it, you can change it, you can modify, you can change your impulse
yeah.
control. And yet so many people just hit the horn in the car and say, F you, and just it's just like
Yeah.
this impulsive release of steam that happens. And when it happens on
Yeah.
a national scale, it can be super frightening, because suddenly you have people that are mad
Mm,
and they're fed up, and they just say, they push a button, they give an order, and next thing you know, a bomb has gone off somewhere, and they say,
yeah.
"See, we told you. We told you that we were cross. We were angry, and you didn't believe us, and we
Mm,
threatened you, and we said, if you do this again, we're going to punch you in the nose, and we just punched you in the nose. What are you going to do
mm,
about it?" And so that whole escalation of national tension and all, that's where I think I find it really scary right now, because the world does feel scary, especially to children. I don't know if you've talked to a
yeah.
child recently
Yeah.
about what's happening in the world, and people should, leaders of nations should be forced to sit down with a group of 20 under 10-year-old children, and they should look at those under
Mm,
10s, and they should ask questions about war. They should ask questions about the environment and global warming and climate change and all these things. Listen to the children. Listen to these children who are going to live into many, many,
yeah.
many years after these world leaders are dead and gone. And they should listen to what these
Yeah.
children say, because that, to me, is the way to set a better course for a less angry future, a more peaceful future. I think I found a cartoon. It wasn't a cartoon; it was like an illustration of a place that was on the border between Slovakia, Austria, and Hungary. And the reason Slovakia has been on my brain is I used to dance with the Bailey Mountain Cloggers. I believe it or not, long time ago, I was a dancer
Wow.
at university, and
Wow.
they are actually representing the United States of America in a dancing global dancing program in Slovakia as we record this today, and
Oh,
and then
nice.
and I bumped into this place because there's a lot of focus on borders and nationalism and people having porous borders. There's a lot of conversation in the UK about migration of people and immigration and things like that. So it's a hot topic around the world. And I bumped into this
Absolutely.
fantastic picture of a picnic table that, and I when I first read about it, I thought this doesn't exist, and then I looked it up online, and it does. And I have a picture in front of me right now. There is a picnic table on the border between Slovakia, Austria, and Hungary, where the three countries come together at a point. And someone, I'd love to know more about this table. I probably will go read about it. Someone built a picnic
Yeah.
table. It's a triangular shaped picnic table. And the idea is people from these three nations can come and have a picnic at the table which sits
No.
upon the border between the three nations. It's not a fence with razor
Amazing.
wire. It's not some imposing
Yeah.
barrier, keep out, stay away. It's an image of neighborliness. It's so inviting because you see this empty table and you think, gosh, I'd love to have a packed lunch. And you go to the table and who will
Oh,
I
yeah.
meet today from Slovakia, and will they share
Yeah.
their piece of fruit with me? It's an image
Yeah.
that really says so much to me. Maybe I'm
Mm.
a bit crazy because I know there are real needs for border protection and all this kind of stuff, and this is a bit of a utopian concept, but it is so nice to think about
It
borders
is.
which are welcoming instead of imposing, that are friendly and
Yeah.
rather than anger producing and tension rising. um,
Yeah, and that someone's actually thought the world needs
yeah,
this sort of thing. I mean, it gives you hope that there are people out there who have good hearts and
yeah.
want to see change. But like you say, I mean, I'll put the photo of it up. It might be even coming up as
Oh,
I
cool.
speak when this is all finished. But it is so inviting. They've even put like little shrubbery so that it's just great. I like you. I'd love to go and
Mm.
sit there and learn from
Yeah,
people. And
you
yeah,
imagine that if the places between people become places of possibility and curiosity rather than places of division
mm,
and hostility, that surely that is
mm,
the magic to make society better. And back to what we said at the beginning of this is that you're talking about anger and hostility and being mad, and I think to myself,
mm,
if the place between me and my neighbor and my other neighbor, if I can erect a picnic table of love and possibility in between those relationships always, imagine
yeah,
how much better my
yeah,
life would be, instead of constantly trying to change my neighbor and trying to twist them
yeah,
into believing like I do or thinking like I do or seeing the color red in the same way that I see the color red, but instead of just saying, I'm
mm,
going to erect a possible space between us where we can come together and where I will sit down and listen to who you are, in the hopes that maybe you'll sit down and listen to who I am, and we'll share our sandwich. And I mean, that
yeah,
that seems to be such a better way of living than what we have at the moment, which is, you all wish you could be like us. Don't you all wish you could come and be on our side of the table and see lunch the way we see lunch, instead of saying you're going to
yeah,
sit there and
yeah,
have your your meat and potatoes in Slovakia. But again, maybe this is
Yeah.
simplistic,
Yeah.
but I don't think Jesus was about letting the rubbish persist unchallenged. And I think when I said that
Okay.
I really think about the money lenders in the temple, I think Jesus looks at a situation like we have in the world right now, and I think it offends him. I really think it deeply offends the heart of God that he sees all of his
Yeah.
children. We're all created in his image. And he looks down at us and he says, "What is going on?" And I think he
Yeah.
probably would just show up and absolutely throw the tables to the side, flip everything over, and says, "What is wrong with you in your pursuit of Bitcoin? You know, this world has become so
Absolutely.
consumed
Yeah.
with greed and wealth and power and control, and
Mm,
it's lost its sense of love and gentleness and sweetness and art. You know, what our world would
yeah.
be if we would stop." Stop being such manipulative, controlling people, and instead become curious,
Yeah.
loving people. Um, yeah,
That'd be
and
amazing.
I
I mean,
came upon a
so
quote
different.
this week. The key to happiness is letting each situation be what it is, instead of what you think it should be. The key to happiness is letting
Ooh.
each situation be what it is instead of what you think it should be. Imagine a world where people aren't so consumed with trying to control the things which are beyond their control. I think that's one of the most compelling things, because we
Mm,
are so concerned with the with other people that we often fail to really look at ourselves carefully. You know, the what is the thing the guy says when you point your finger? You know, you've got three fingers pointing at you, and eh,
oh yeah, pointing
but
back at
I
you.
think
Yeah.
again, I think anger and being mad and cross oftentimes are wrapped up in our projection of our own disillusionment with self onto a world around us that is so broken. And so it's very, I mean,
I
that's your
think so.
cognitive behavioral therapy again. If you sit down with a therapist sometimes and you start saying, you know, my dad was like this and my best friend let me down and I had this grief in my life, and you have your long list, and your therapist will kind of look at you and they'll say, "Well, tell me why this bothers you. What is it in you that gets revved up when you start talking about this thing and this thing and this thing?" And next thing you know,
Yeah.
you've suddenly realized that all the things that you're mad about that are out there are actually things that are
Mm,
deep down inside
mm,
your own heart. And so the therapist is like, "So
yeah.
you now realize that you're not angry at the world, you're disappointed in yourself." And so that's
Yeah.
transformative, and that's a
It
metaphorical
really.
way of cleaning the temple. If your body's your temple, this is Jesus cleansing the temple.
Mm,
He's saying, let me wash away
mm,
all this junk that's living in your life,
mm.
and give you the, you know, the it sounds terrible, like the cleansing colonoscopy of the faith, you know, to give you this new possibility of living a life where you're not just ticked off with the world, you know, where you can find
Yeah.
joy
Yeah.
and happiness. Because I think that's the kind of
Yeah.
general gist of today's podcast, is to say, I'm tired of being, what is it? I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I don't want to
Yeah.
wake up in the
Yeah.
morning and turn the news on and doom scroll on my phone. And I want something that's going to bring joy and happiness to each day. And so that's kind of where
Mm,
I'm
mm.
coming from today.
It's really helpful. It really is something to think about. And I was just thinking as you were talking as well. I find if I'm feeling angry, or even you experience anger around you, it makes you so
Hmm.
inward looking, and consumed by either yourself or just what the emotion is doing to you. And I love the invitation that you've just said about actually let's be consumed by the joy,
Hmm.
the happiness, the truth of who God is rather than who He isn't. And I think that's a lovely
Mm.
invitation for us, as a ministry, and for anyone listening that, you're just feeling very consumed by feeling sick and tired of
Yeah.
feeling sick and
Yeah.
tired. That invitation is there for you. There's also a really great little quote, that, Chris, if you could read it, it's the one on the
Oh,
book
yeah.
page. Just
So
I know.
imagine reading a book with no way to turn back the page. How carefully would you read it? And then it says, that's life at the bottom. Imagine reading a book with no way to turn back the page. How carefully would you read it? Because I'm terrible. I read fast and then I'll just skip things. And I think sometimes
Yeah,
I live my life that way too. And I think, oh gosh,
yeah.
did I miss out? When I was on
Mm,
the train coming back from Dorchester on Saturday, I went to visit our fantastic hub in Dorchester, and I just say, if you live in the Dorchester Poundbury in particular area, Poundbury is beautiful. Yeah, King
it
Charles
is,
did
isn't
an
it?
amazing thing with the design and the architecture there. It's fascinating. It's beautiful.
It's
But in the
awesome.
middle of it is this little quiet space, and the hub that we have there is wonderful. It's just really probably the epitome of a perfect Acorn hub, and the people that are there
Yeah.
are just fine, fine, fine people. And I got to go to Anne's house and visit her little pet tortoise, which was fun.
Oh
I loved her
yeah.
little pet tortoise. I managed not to step on him, but he kept trying to bite. She kept trying to bite my socks. I had these bright colored socks, and she would
Really.
sneak under the table and nip at my ankles. But
Oh.
I think the train ride there, it it's long, but it's so beautiful. And you think to yourself, if I
Mm,
was so consumed with something on my phone in front of me, I would miss the beautiful, the Dorset
yeah.
hills and the rolling
Yeah.
landscape around Southampton. And then, better than that, I was on a train with all these kids who had just finished their GCSEs. And they were off to have a big party. And I don't know how old a GCSE student is, like 15, 16 years old. And
Yeah.
so they were all
Yeah.
excited they go, it was really quite funny because immediately they go, "You American? You American?" I was like, "Yeah, where are you from in America?" And uh, and so I'm like, my go-to conversation is always, "Well, my daughter does TikTok. My daughter has a TikTok
Yeah.
account.
Yeah.
And oh, we do TikTok." So immediately they whip out their phones and they
Yeah.
find my daughter's TikTok account. And so I think, okay, this will be funny. So I record like a selfie, and then all the girls on the
Yeah.
train, all these wonderful children. I mean, it makes me feel old though because they're so young. And I got them
Aw.
to say hi to my daughter. And so we recorded a
Nice.
Snapchat, and I sent it to her, and she's on a little holiday at the moment. And they sent her this, and of course she then writes back, "Dad, you're so weird." I said, I'd rather be weird than angry. And to see the
Yeah.
beautiful
Yeah.
Dorset countryside rolling by with the foreground of these happy kids who've just finished their exams, and they're so happy, sending a message to my daughter, which makes me happy. And of course, as they were ready to leave
Mm.
the train, I looked at them like the good dad that I am, and I said, "Look, be sensible tonight. Don't be stupid." And they're like, "Okay." but but because I had to get that in, because I know after GCSEs they're off to meet their mates, and I imagine there's a few pints of lager that are
Yeah.
going to be consumed somewhere in Southampton. But it's
Yeah.
a
I
it's
think
a
a few.
beautiful thing to think that that was my afternoon, and I had this
Mm.
great full day of experiencing the work of Acorn and the prayer hub there, and seeing some actual ministry that was happening. And then to
Yeah.
ride back,
Awesome.
and I when I got back, I thought, am I tired, am I exhausted? And I really found myself coming I was walking up the street to the house, and I thought, it's been a long day. It started at like 5:30 in the morning, and I thought, I'm not
Wow.
tired, I'm exhilarated. because this
That's
is
awesome.
living in the spirit. This is living for God, and there was ministry happening through that whole time. And so um,
Yeah,
so sharing
yeah,
it
that's
here is
great.
my way of like sharing, because I feel quite selfish when I have such a wonderful experience to not share that with the wider
Oh,
world and say, where can you find God in your ordinariness
yeah,
today? Your train ride,
yeah,
yeah,
I think that's awesome.
you're in the grocery store
Yeah,
shopping and you see somebody that needs a can off a higher shelf. I mean, there's an opportunity there, not just to give them the can, but to give them a little bit of yourself. Um, yeah, there
absolutely.
was an
Yeah, maybe those.
I was just going to say there was an
Sorry, go on.
American on my train ride. I had multiple train rides, and I had an American on one, and somebody was getting on the coach on the train, and the other American and I both spoke to them. And then we looked at each other and we laughed and we went, American? And she said, yeah. She went, yeah. And then we laughed and we said, never lose the instinct to kindness, because there is a temptation
Yeah.
sometimes to fall into that disconnected rut. We were heading from Woking up toward London, and sometimes
Mm,
you get into the London commute mode of operating where you don't speak to anybody and you don't interact,
yeah,
stay in your lane.
yeah,
But then there was a moment where being nice to a
yeah.
young mother who was struggling with bags and a pushchair and all this stuff, and
Oh,
but it was kind of nice to be affirmed by another person. And again, I think when you do
definitely.
nice things, it's contagious. And it's like paying it forward. People see
Yes.
people doing nice things and they do nice things. And wouldn't that make the world a less angry
Yeah.
place and a happier place?
Oh,
And
goodness.
so,
Yeah.
if only it would change the temperature outside and make it cooler. But at least,
Yeah. I had a lovely experience the other day though, where I was in the shop, our local shop, buying some bits and pieces, and I hadn't transferred money into our account, so we keep it in a separate account, and forgot. So I went up to the till, and they said, "Oh, it's been declined." And I thought,
mm,
"Oh, what a wally!" And let me just transfer the money. And as I was doing it, the woman behind me said, "Oh, I'll get that for you." And I said, "No, no, no, I've got the money." She said, "No, no, I want to get it for you." And honestly, it
oh,
stuck with me until I went to bed
yeah,
that night, because I was just like, there are some good people out there, and it changes the atmosphere. The Yeah, everything changes because you think, wow, I don't know this
mm,
person. They've shown me love. They've shown me care. And actually, I think that's probably how some of those kids would have felt on the train, having a nice experience with
yeah,
somebody they don't know. And that's a part of what we do in this
yeah.
ministry and life.
And they realize that there's a whole lot more to
Mm.
America than Disney World. It's kind of because they look at you and they
Oh
say, "I've
yeah.
been to America," and you say, "Where have you been?" "Oh, we went to Disney World." And then the one girl looked at me and she
Yeah.
goes, "I just want to go to L.A." And I went, well, "Why? Why do you want to go to Los Angeles?" Well, I've always wanted to go to L.A. And then she looked at me and she says, "Where
Oh.
would you go?" And I said, "Well, I'd go to Pigeon
Mm.
Forge, Tennessee, and go to Dollywood.
Oh,
I'd go to the
yes.
world's happiest place and see Dolly Parton, or go to the
Yeah.
shows in Pigeon
Yeah.
Forge or something." And they said the food, and next thing you know, they're all
Mm.
pulling out their phones, going, "Oh, Dollywood! Look at that! It's lovely! It's lovely!" Um, but
Oh,
yeah, I feel
brilliant.
like the temperature has gone down just while we've been talking. So I hope whoever's listening today feels encouragement, and they feel a little
Mm.
boost from our coffee pod.
Thanks for listening to CoffeePods today.
Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe.
This podcast is made possible thanks in part to the generosity of people like you.